So you finished The Smiling Friends, binged every episode, maybe even watched it twice or 10 times like myself, and now you've just been sitting there wondering, what now? What else hits that same chaotic, absurd, low-key genius vibe? The kind of show that feels completely unhinged, but still weirdly relatable. Well, don't worry, I've got 5 shows that might scratch that exact itch. Some are animated, some are live action, but all of them share the same level of unhinged, brilliant energy that made The Smiling Friends so damn special. There are sure to be a couple you haven't seen before on this list, and maybe a couple you've already seen, so be sure to let me know in the comments if there's any you haven't seen before. I actually made a video on underrated Adult Swim shows previously in one of my first videos, so if you've seen most of the shows on this list, be sure to check that video out. So with that introduction out of the way, let's get started. Ugly Americans is one of the most underrated gems that flew under the radar for many people, but it's perfect for fans of Smiling Friends who love dark humor mixed with surreal world building. Set in an alternate New York City where humans coexist with demons, zombies, wizards, and every imaginable monster, the show follows Mark, a social worker just trying to help these bizarre citizens adjust to normal life. The art style is simple, but creative enough that it almost feels identical to BoJack Horseman. Every character in the background looks unique and hilarious, but the show plays it all completely straight. Just like Smiling Friends, the comedy comes from the contrast between the absurd and the mundane, and the office setting, as every episode typically has Mark set out to make a character in the show figure out how to settle into the world they're in. Just like Smiling Friends, how they make everybody smile. It sadly never caught on with audiences, likely due to the fact that it was lacking a real identity outside of being dry and sometimes absurd. Perhaps if it had more of an emotional punch like BoJack, it would have caught on. But regardless, it's a fun 2-season show from Comedy Central that I highly recommend if you want to see all kinds of monsters depicted in incredibly mundane settings. And if you ever love the boss's demon wife, you'll love Callie, and not just from the back. Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared takes the unsettling undertones of Smiling Friends and cranks them up to a disturbing, surreal extreme. Not to be mistaken with the YouTube series, there was actually a TV show that aired on Channel 4. So this one likely did fly under your radar as it was insanely underrated, and arguably even better than the YouTube series that went viral years before. What starts as a bright, cheery puppet show quickly unravels into a nightmare of existential dread, glitchy visuals, and a warped lesson about creativity, love, and time. It's equal parts parody and psychological horror, often blurring the line between satire and something genuinely disturbing. If you loved how Smiling Friends hinted at lore, despite Zach and Michael saying lore hardly exists, this show will absolutely scratch that itch, as every bit of hinted lore and theory discussion that was online actually led to a genuinely satisfying conclusion. Like Smiling Friends, it lures you in with the familiar cartoon aesthetics and family-friendly character designs before ultimately pulling the rug out from under you. But here, the rug might be bleeding. If you're into comedy that gets really uncomfortably close to horror while still being clever and visually creative, Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared is essential viewing.
A worm in his brain? How are we supposed to know that?
And as a quick bonus, Panty and Stocking with Garterbelt is an incredibly silly and sexy, hyper-stylized episodic anime that fans of Smiling Friends will instantly vibe with. Both the shows thrive on humor pairing 2 unlikely characters together. Additionally, it has unique, ever-changing animation styles, and unexpected emotional depth hidden beneath miles of ironic humor. And if anime isn't your thing, then don't worry, because most of the show actually looks like something that would come straight off of Cartoon Network. If you love shows like Powerpuff Girls and wondered what a show with them as hot adult superheroes that fight with their underwear once an episode would be like, this is a show for you. Even better, it's finally getting a long-awaited new season very soon. Perfect timing to dive into or rewatch, and join the hype before the return. If Smiling Friends scene-to-scene surreal insanity is your cup of tea, then Cromartie High School is a must-watch. This absurdist anime takes the classic high school delinquent trope and absolutely demolishes what you'd expect from a show with characters that look like this.
That can't be normal.
Especially if you watch the English dub. The show genuinely feels like something that would play late at night on Adultswim.
Lesson 1. Looks are a vital part of being a delinquent. Amateurs should try bleaching their hair blonde to look tough. Be careful. If the chemicals are too strong, your hair will turn white and you'll look like a pussy.
Damn it.
The way that the visual humor almost feels perfectly tailored to Western audiences. The show follows Kamiyama, an ordinary student who somehow ends up at Cromartie High, a school filled with terrifying, silent tough guys, robots, and a gorilla who somehow acts more civilized than the humans in the school. And for some reason, Freddie Mercury. Yes, seriously. What makes Cromartie so special is just how straight it plays its insanity. The characters are dead serious, even when the situations are completely off the rails and batshit. It's a constant barrage of non sequiturs, weird conversations, and intentionally stiff animation that somehow makes everything much funnier. Just like Smiling Friends, it finds comedy in the mundane, the awkward, and the absolute downright surreal. Every episode of the anime feels like an underground sketch show that somehow snuck its way into the mainstream of anime. If you adored the realistic dialogue of Smiling Friends that sometimes sneaked into the most insane episodes, this show will absolutely be your favorite. And just like the Smiling Friends, it's only 10 minutes an episode, so it never sticks around for far too long. If you want to experience something that feels like an absolute fever dream, then Cromartie High School delivers that energy 100%. If you want to watch it, it's entirely free on YouTube, link below. Now this is one you probably saw online at one point or another, as it was greatly shared online as memes. Pop Team Epic is pure chaos in the best possible way. A rapid-fire barrage of absurd sketches, anime parodies, and fourth wall breaks that it sometimes feels like the unfiltered id of the internet culture. If Smiling Friends speaks to the love of unpredictable, often incredibly stupid humor, this show somehow takes it even further. Each episode is a wild mix of visual gags, surreal dialogue, and purposely janky animation, often delivered by different voice actors doing the exact same scenes twice. It often feels like you're watching a meme template made into a TV show, which is likely due to the comics essentially being memes themselves. As I said before, you've probably seen them online once or twice. Completely unpredictable and endlessly quotable, Pop Team Epic is an absolute must-watch absurdist comedy for people who find themselves laughing at the dumbest things. Now last but absolutely not least, the 2015 Muppets series is criminally, and I mean criminally, overlooked, and surprisingly perfect for fans of Smiling Friends. Styled like The Office, it trades in slapstick for dry, awkward humor.
There are a lot of challenges being the executive producer of a show starring your ex. One of the biggest? This is where I park. Every day.
Turning beloved characters into jaded, overworked professionals navigating everyday chaos. It feels like a bizarre alternate universe where the Smiling Friends cast grew up and got office jobs. The mix of absurdity, deadpan delivery, and subtle existential dread gives a strange edge that's way funnier than it has any right to be, especially if you're into that unhinged comedy vibe. I'd originally put it off because I'd assumed it was too cynical. However, after watching Saberspark's video on the Muppets, and how most of the old heads at the Henson Company are too gatekeepy with their property changing, I realized I needed to watch it. And I can confidently say, guys, it's a bold new take for the Muppets that actually works. And no, Kermit and Miss Piggy don't actually stay broken up, which was one of my main concerns. In fact, Kermit's nephew himself even hints in the final episode that no matter how many times they might break up, they were made for each other. Total goobers. If you were on the fence like me on this show, absolutely give it a chance, especially if you enjoyed the heartfelt moments of Smiling Friends, and you want to see Rizzo and Pepe get canonically wasted. Well, that's it, guys. I hope there's a couple shows in here that you haven't seen before, because if you're anything like me and are as excited as I am for Season 3 of Smiling Friends, you likely have nothing to fill the void with. So, these should be able to do a good enough job for you for now. With that all said, if you haven't already, drop a like and comment below, and I'll see you next week, guys. Take it easy.